Okay, sorry it took me so long to get this tutorial out, but I'm having so much damn fun playing with these film stock gears that I haven't been able to tear myself away from DaVinci. So here we go. You can see I've been playing around. Let me kind of show you what I did here. I've got two adjustment layers here, in which case I'm basically re-exposing the footage, and then I'm auditioning different gears, running it through a film stock, throttle, light leak, etc. None of this will make any sense to you right off the bat unless you have a lot of experience working in DaVinci. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn this off so you can see. And I have a relatively mild adjustment going here. I have let me show you, let me turn all these off so you can see what's going on. So I have done this to my footage. Here's my footage, which is a relatively unremarkable shot, but it is decently exposed. Let me bring the scopes in here. You can see that I am completely blown out right here, which is this leaf. So I've got no detail in there at all. The leaves are pretty much dead even, a little bit, or I'm sorry, the flower is pretty much dead even, which is, you know, pretty good exposure there. And then these highlights on these bamboo shafts here are up above 80. If you go back to the expose in the zone tutorial, where I show you that for DSLRs, especially the GH2, you want to keep your highlights below 80 and you want to keep your shadows above 20 if you can. In this particular case, I didn't have any control over the light, so I've got shadows coming all the way down almost to zero, and I've got highlights blowing completely out. But what I want to focus on is these flowers here in the middle, and they're pretty decently exposed. So the adjustment that I put on it was, if we do this, you can see that I brought the shadows up to around 20, brought the highlights down below 80, adjusted the midtones. You can see them down here. Here's the shadow lift and the gamma lift, and I brought the highlights down. And I'm still right around my target range. And this is a range that I put into the waveform monitor here. It's a little line, which is pretty much where I want skin tone. Anything I want to, if I want to target the exposure on it, this is about 55 IRE. And the way that you do that is you right click here and you go to reference levels, and then you set like high. My high is set at 600, so around 60, low set to 70. And that kind of shows me, it's just a reference. That's the low one down here and the high one up here. So I've got a very compressed image. And you want a compressed image if you're going to use the film stocks. And the reason why is, let me shove this out of the way, is because what these do, there's a bunch of curves thrown into these that are basically, let me go to the curves so you can see. If I were to, let's go to, let me just create a new thing in here so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to hit Option S to create a new serial node. That would be Alt S on a PC. And if I were to adjust the curve, you'll see it will change the exposure. I'm just going to put an S curve on here so you can see. And most people think you put an S curve on your footage and that's going to give you something that looks more like film. Not really. Yes and no. Film does have a logarithmic curve to it, like this. And there's some pretty complex curves that go into these gears. But essentially what I'm doing by flattening this image out is I want to basically, or essentially re-expose the footage. So I want to take the image and sort of put it back into almost like this is what, you know, log footage tends to look like when you bring it in. And then shove it through the gears again so that the curves, so instead of a flat line along the way, along the image, it's being basically redistributed along the curve back down into the shadows and redistributed along the curve up into the highlights. That won't make a lot of sense to you, but I wanted to those of you that understand curves, you'll understand what these gears are doing. For the rest of you, it'll take you probably a while to understand. But essentially, it's almost as if I'm reshooting my footage on film. So let me go ahead and delete that gear. I'm not going to use the audition because with the auditions, I was playing with putting certain gears in front of the film stock and then putting them after the film stock to see what kind of a difference it made. You'll see that that's kind of fun. And then, of course, I have a different adjustment. If I turn this off, I have a different adjustment going on here, which is even flatter. you can see that it's really flat. And that's going to be for a different look. Okay, so let's turn that off. Here's our raw footage. Here is I will call it like a primer adjustment or a log adjustment there. And then we're going to use the Fuji 3513. Let me show you how that is in there. I have it applied, film stock 3513. Come on, right there. And let's turn that on. And look at that. It almost looks like a film still, or maybe a slide. And then I'm going to apply a throttle. And there's two different throttles in here. I'll show you Throttle 2. Throttle 2 gives you a more vintage look. It does warm up the shadows, gives you, something that looks more like a vintage film stock. And you can use these all differently. And then Throttle 1, which is more of a modern look. So now I've got something that's got heavy contrast to it. I can back this throttle off. I've already got it backed off a little bit, but I could back it off more, if I wanted to just make that a light effect, or I can leave it all the way up if I want a heavy effect. Back it back down to about 70. And now I can play with different looks. Let's say I wanted to add that here. Let me show you where it is. This Lavender Burst afterwards. I would hit Lavender Burst, and I would turn this on. So that's what it looks like afterwards, which is really cool. It's almost like an infrared, but it looks completely different than if I were to audition it here. Here's a very mild look. This is also kind of that infrared thing. See that everything's being remapped tonally. So if you put the gears in front of the film stock or after the film stock, you get different looks. So again, that's before the film stock. This is after the film stock. Both of them are really cool, but it is a different look. And of course, we can change that. I got some customs in here. This was for like a really green bathroom shot, but that also looks different after than it does before. If I were to put that same custom LUT before and then turn that gear on, you can see it's very, very muted. So before, after. So that should give you at least a little bit of a start there. But I also want to show you this different look that I made with the same essential settings. So I'm going to turn this throttle off. I'm going to turn this adjustment off. I'm going to leave the Fuji film stock on. I'm going to turn Throttle 2 on and the first adjustment. You can see now that's a much different look. I got some detail back here in the shadows. And then if I were to go and apply a light leak, some people have been looking for this kind of a look for a while, and now you can actually create it, and you can adjust this. Let's say you want more of a like a filterish kind of effect. You can crank this up. If you want less, you can crank it down. What if we were to introduce that? Now we've got a very muted look, but still have the sort of light leak over the top. Or if we were to put that same gear afterwards, now it's more heavier, it's more red. I can change this. I can go to maybe our Tone Monsters and Tone Monster. Let's go Tony Scott. That's before, or that's after. Let's try putting it before. Reactivate that. So, you have a lot of different options here, but let me show you how to do this from scratch so that you completely understand how to build your film stocks. So let's go ahead and by hitting Option-Shift-A, or for you Windows users, that would be Alt-Shift-A. You can see a new color grading version has been added, and I'm going to reset all grades and nodes. So we have our raw footage. Now there's a couple of different ways you can do this. What you're essentially going to need is you're going to need a primer, a film stock, and a throttle. You may not like the primers, the presets that I've made, so you may want to do a custom primer to your footage. So this first node you're going to leave alone. I'm going to hit Option or Alt-S 3 times, and I'm going to create 3 nodes. I'm going to label them. I'm going to call this one Throttle. Call this one film stock. And you'll want to label that. You want to go back and label this whatever film stock you use, but I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. And then we're going to change this label to primer. Okay, so now if I just wanted to do a standard sort of really quick look, I would go in and add, let's see, primer 1. Primer 1 goes really well with throttle 1, so let's go throttle 1, but you can use throttle 2 if you wish. So, and then go grab a film stock, and let's go, let's see, EXR, I'm going to go 5293, let's go 5293. Okay, that's really green. Okay, so let's use a different one. Let's use 5298. Ooh, I like that. Really, but it's really heavy, and this, you can see that the blacks are really crushed, but this is a really nice look. So what I could do, let's say the primer is not giving me what I want. You can see the primer did bring, let's bring our scopes back in. Primer did bring the highlights down. And you can see that our histogram is not getting screwed up. Our highlights are boom, 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 shadows, boom, boom, boom. It's not being bent. So, but to get the look that I think I want out of this, I'm going to have to bend the footage. So it's at this point that I will do it. I'm going to turn the primer on. I'm going to go to the footage itself. I'm going to leave my scopes up here. And I'm going to, you can see that I'm, when you first bring this up, you have your three-way color, you have your log color, and if you click this icon here, you get your primaries. Now, this goes back to my days when I first started working with DaVinci, in which I had a control surface. And with a control surface, you have like little track wheels for different controls, and you can just punch up a button and your controls switch over to whatever you have popped up to control. So I'm on a Magic Mouse, so I can very quickly just zip through this just by using the scroll wheel, or the invisible scroll wheel on my Magic Mouse. And this is how I control my image, but I don't want to be messing with the gain, so I'm gonna redo that. I want to mess with the gamma, so I'm going to pump this up. And you can see my highlights are getting out of control. They're going up above 80, and my image is stretching out, so now I'm going to bring the gain down. So if my flowers aren't, bring my flowers into good exposure around there. And I want to bring the shadows up a little bit. So that's going to change everything as well. You see everything's getting kind of crazy. Maybe bring the gamma down. Definitely bring the highlights. And there. So very quickly and very simply, I've done that. You can see I did start to bend my image a little bit, but that's my final correction right there. That's very, very easy, very, very quick. Let's say my throttle's still a little much. I can come in, bring it down, back it off, get those shadows back. And grade complete. Now, if I want to do any grading on top of that, I absolutely can. Let me get this out of here. I can add some more serial nodes by hitting Option S or Alt S on a PC. And let's say it's a little too warm for my taste, so I want to go simply cooler. It cools it off a little bit. And let's say that I'm going to do something stylistically, maybe. Let's say maybe at this point I just want to bump up the saturation. Just go to the spectral enhancer. Ooh, look at that. It's nice, but it's a little much. It's actually kind of distorting the footage a little bit. So let's back it off. See it without it. That with it. Really punchy. It's too punchy. Let's bring it down. And voila, we render from there. So while we're here, I did want to show you a couple things. Show you how I got this footage in. I don't have any grain on here right now, but I do have a grain layer in here. If you look, you can't really see it all the way back here. Well, here, let's just go back to conform. So I don't have a grain layer over this. So what I can do is I can drag this grain layer down here on top of my, my footage. I'm going to zoom in. And I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to set it to overlay. Go back to color. And what the hell happened? Oh, my footage moved. Here, I want to be back here. So this is, so I want to go back to my edit and make sure that my grain is over the top of that part of my edit. Okay, so now I have grain added in. You can see you can see where I'm at in the timeline. You can see the grain layers in here. And you can't really see the grain because in the way that DaVinci applies grain, it's really, really light. I would say leave it alone because it will give you a very, very nice soft grain image. But let's say you want more out of it. You could switch to a different type of grain. You could switch to maybe 500 or 800, which is a heavier grain. Or you can go into the grain layer and you can, let's go to our contrast, and I can crank up the contrast, and that will give me a heavier grain. You can see that's completely crazy on here. I've got some, I can't even see it. I must, oh, I know why, because I'm an idiot, because I have it turned off. So let's turn the grain layer back on by clicking that icon. And now, wow, way too much grain. So let's back contrast off. You can see now, you can see the grain. But let's take it back to 1. Double click, hit 1. That's the natural. And then it's a nice, soft, smooth grain. And then you can go to render. I did want to show you this so that you know I do not want to render that. I want to render this. But I only want to render from like grain in to grain out. So I'm going to right click this and click mark out. I'm going to come here and right click it again and click mark in. You can see this highlight here. That's the only thing it's going to render. So I can just render this clip with the grain. I can go over here. I've already got this set the way I want. QuickTime, ProRes 444, 1920 by 1080, single clip. I want to put it somewhere, so I'm going to browse, and I want to put it in the grain test folder. And then I'm going to click Add Job. It's going to give me a warning, says that there's already footage in there. You might be overwriting it. I know I'm not because I don't have anything named what this thing is named. I'm going to click Continue. And then I'm going to click this and click Start Render. Boom, done. Okay, so that rendered out, what was that? That was a 41, it was 12 seconds of footage, or 10 seconds of footage, relatively quickly. I had a lot of grading going on in there. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I'll be doing a lot more. There's a lot of different film stocks that you can work with. In fact, if we were to just go in and start changing film stocks from this point on, you can see the difference. If we were to go, say, Fuji 3513, it's going to look different from Vision 2. I'm just cycling through these. This is not how they're, obviously, there's Vision 3. Let's go EXR 5298. 5293. It's very green. And then the EXR open. And I think that's 3510. So that covers them all. Those are your basic stocks, and you can create whatever look you want. I can change throttles. Let's say I want to change this throttle from throttle, I think it's throttle 1 to throttle 2. And that will give me a different look. And then same thing with primer. I can change it from primer 1 to primer 2. And that will give me a different look. So essentially, with all the film stocks that you have access to, it's about 28 different film stocks using different primers, different throttles, different grades, etc. Well, even minus the grades. Just using different throttles, different film stocks, and different primers, you have 28 different options. And you can pretty much create almost any look you want. If you have any questions, email me, colorgear@gmail.com. In part 2, I'll do some more stuff with this, but this is part 1. This is just a quick lesson, and you should be able to create some really cool stuff now.